usually done in the past. The mystery of mercy. We read Bible stories and they tend to be two-dimensional. We see them in our beautiful little Bibles and we leave them there. We tend to point out, well, such and such did this and so did this, and oh, I wouldn't have done that. And so we're going to spend the next couple of weeks looking at some of these and seeing where we fit into the picture. Luke chapter 17, beginning with verse 11. On the way to Jerusalem, Jesus was passing along between Samaria and Galilee. And as he entered a village, he was met by 10 lepers who stood at a distance and lifted their voices, saying, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." When he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourself to the priests." And as they went, they were cleansed. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice, and fell on his face at Jesus' feet, giving him thanks. And he was a Samaritan. Then Jesus answered, "Were not 10 cleansed? Where are the 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" And he said to him, "Rise and go your way. Your faith has made you well." Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem for the final Passover. The geography of all of this is a little strange, how he ends up between Samaria and Galilee, and it's really non-essential for the story. But he's traveling with a group of pilgrims going up from Galilee. We've talked about this, even though he's going south elevation-wise, he's going up. And he enters into a village, and we run into some interesting people. One, people cry for help when they know their needs. There weren't a lot of medications at this time, and the ones that were there weren't what really want. We do know at this time that there were certain cultures that were practicing brain surgery. They would drill a hole in your head and let the evil spirits drain out, along with anything else that decided wanted to come out as well. Not high on my list of things to do. The way you cleaned wounds was with wine and olive oil. Your painkillers were usually enough wine to make it not hurt. Take that one for what it's worth. That didn't really change for a whole long time. And just so you know, if you take cough syrup, you're following in a long tradition. Look at the number 1 ingredient. But for leprosy, there wasn't a whole lot that you could do. This was a disease that once it infected somebody, it was a death sentence. They were required to live away from people, to wear certain garments, to cry out, "Unclean, unclean," whenever they came into contact with people. And yet Jesus had a habit of touching these individuals. This was not something that you did, not just for the law's sake, but for health's sake. You could contract the disease. Yet he did. And as he entered the village, 10 lepers stood at a distance, and they cried out, lifting up their voice, saying, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." They've evidently heard what's gone on. They've evidently seen what's happened. And, I mean no disrespect, it's a shot in the dark. What's the worst thing that can happen? They're in the same situation they're in. There is no other option for them. People get real religious when there's no other options. It's amazing how many times people will, quote, go to church and then disappear and then show back up when the bottom's dropped out. And then when everything's fine and good, they disappear again. It's kind of funny how that is. It's kind of funny how religion becomes a good luck charm. I have seen it. I have had friends who have done it. A very good friend that was in my Army unit that had a crucifix that his uncle had carried in Vietnam and got him through the Vietnam War without being shot. And so he was going to carry it when we were in Iraq. Didn't have the heart to tell him that it wasn't going to do him a bit of good unless somebody was able to hit a crucifix about that big. But we do that. We like religion as long as it doesn't interfere. We like it when things work. We like it until Jesus makes demands. The 10 stood and they hollered as loud as they could for him to have mercy on them. And Jesus, yet again, if you've been here on Wednesday nights, we've seen this. He does things differently. He doesn't touch them. He doesn't go to them. He doesn't even break stride. He continues to go about his business. But it says he did two things. One, he saw them, and two, he spoke to them. He actually looked at 10 men that nobody would even pay attention to. He looked at 10 men that by every right should have been ignored. He looked at 10 men who were in such bad, grotesque shape. I don't even know how to describe. Skin is literally falling off their bones. Their clothes are in tatters. There's sores all over. It's the most grotesque appearance that you can conceive of. Not somebody that you're inviting home for dinner. And Jesus looks at them. And the very one who created them, the very one who created all that there is with simply a word, the very one who controlled creation with simply a word, said to them, "Go and show yourself to the priest. No, you're cleansed. No, you're healed. Go and do what the law has commanded." Leviticus chapter 14. The priests were the ones who got all the fun jobs. They would go and they would look at those who were lepers. They would check out clothing. They would check out houses. By the way, houses did not contract leprosy. It was black mold. They were the ones that did this. Go to the priest and do what you are supposed to do. Now realize, they're not going just down the street. This is a multiple day journey. And think about this from the 10's perspective. They're going to go on a multiple day journey. They're going to enter Jerusalem. They're going into the temple area to find a priest. And the last thing they know is that they had leprosy. There's no mirrors. There's no doctors to stop at along the way. You try to get into the temple area with leprosy, and at the very best, they're going to eject you, and by eject, I mean launch you out of the city. They may very well throw you in jail. They may very well stone you. Yet, he tells them to go. Help comes to people on the path of obedience. Verse 14. Go show yourselves to the priest. And as they went, as they were going, they were cleansed. Now, let's stop for just a minute. We're all friends. We all get along relatively well. Since Tommy's so graciously buying lunch for all of us today, you did. Well, I mean, hey, since at the auction we were volunteering people, I figured, hey, Mr. Hungate, you think that's a good idea that Tommy buys lunch?
That'll work.
Should we bid on him? Okay. All right, but we all have to agree on where we're going.
McDonald's.
Okay, I got one for McDonald's back there. Anybody else want to throw one out? Luby's? Oh, sorry, Owen, you lost. Anybody else? Yo. Taco Bell got one. He's lacking you and Owen. He's getting out of this easy. Do you see the issue? It's hard enough to get 2 people or 4 people, if you ever want to know, come to our house on a Monday night when we've got dance, trying to agree on where we're going to go for dinner. Imagine 10. What do? Do you go home? Do you go to Jerusalem? Do you take the most direct route? Do you go around the Jordan? Do you do all of these things? Here are 10 people that now have to determine what they're going to do. 2 people are hard enough. 10 is harder. I will never forget the last time the Southern Baptist Convention meeting was coming to Dallas. It had been in Atlanta, Georgia the year before. And they had spent 8 hours, and this is no joke, you can go look in the minutes, debating what barbecue place was going to cater the main meal at the convention. I am not joking. 8,000 Southern Baptists were debating barbecue. Now, is that a worthwhile debate? You bet. 8 hours worth of debates. Suffice it to say, some were happy, some weren't happy. Everybody outside of the state of Texas who believes that pork is barbecue lost the vote, and so the Texans carry the day. You have 10 men who have to agree to do something. Now, regardless of what happens after that, they are healed. So as they're moving, as they're walking, all of these things, bones that had been broken, feet that had hurt, skin that had been falling off, is changing. Now, does that mean that the minute you walk through the doors of a church, everything is peachy keen and wonderful? No. But it means that when Christ sets his mind to something, when he says something will be done, it's done. It's not just a lucky rabbit's foot. The 10 were told what they needed to do. They were obedient. They followed the law strictly. They were good Pharisees at this point in time. Jesus said to go, and they were on the way. But we have a problem. Verses 15 through 19. True gratitude is very, very, very rare. We become very thankful when the bottom that's dropped out is put back on. We become very happy when all of the knots are untangled. We become very happy when we turn in the last paper and you swear you're never going back to school. New Testament. Is there a synoptic issue? I still have the paper at home. I still have the paper where I corrected the corrector because he was incorrect. We're very happy. You will get to that day. Don't mess with the grader, by the way. Just let him go. I have it in my files. This is the most beautiful document ever written. Didn't help that I'd already written the paper before. I just turned it in again. It was mine. I could do that. The 10 leave. And now we find out that 9 of them were Jewish. And they just left. They got so excited and so happy that everything happened, they just left. We've seen, people like this. They need help, they're helped, and they're gone before you can ever blink. Gratitude is not hard. It wouldn't have been difficult to stop and say thank you. I promise the extra 5 minutes wouldn't have affected whether or not they were healed. But vague gratitude to divinity was not an adequate response. J.C. Ryle, an Anglican bishop, writes for us. Christ wanted their hearts. By failing to thank Christ and glorify God, they missed the greatest moment in their lives. Verse 15, then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. It's interesting to see what he sees versus what Peter sees. We've talked about this on Wednesday night. Peter gets out of the boat and he sees the worst case scenario. He sees winds, he sees waves, he sinks. Here's the guy that walked with Jesus, talked with Jesus, lived with Jesus, saw all of this stuff. And no, I'm cutting him absolutely no slack on this one at this point. And yet here's a Samaritan who is the absolute lowest on the rung of society. A leper on top of that. It doesn't get any worse. He sees what happens, and where Peter should have responded by falling down and praising God and thanking Christ, he panicked, and yet the leper, the worst, the dog, the one that never should have been there to begin with, is the one who does. When he saw that he was healed, he turned back, praising God with a loud voice. Did he violate the command that Jesus gave? Yes. Did it make a bit of difference? No. Could the priest wait 5 minutes? Yes. Did the priest, was he going to know the difference? No. Because the Samaritan wasn't going to Jerusalem to begin with. He was going to Mount Gerizim, where the temple for the Samaritans had built was. Anyway, it wasn't an issue of following the law. It It's not an issue of showing up and saying, God, I need, God, I need, God, I need. Guess what? He knows it. It's not an issue of that. It's an issue of when it happens, we so often are ungrateful about it. I listened to, just briefly, the funeral for Supreme Court Justice Scalia and his son, talking about the first time his father came through the confessional. And he recognized his father's voice and turned around and left the confessional and said, ain't no way I'm listening to this. He said, yes, I violated my vows. He said, but it was out of a respect and a gratitude for a father who had raised me to be respectful. There were some things that needed to be handled by others because there was that relationship. Right, wrong, indifference. I can respect a man who looks at it that way. So here's the Samaritan, the dog, the half-breed, the one that shouldn't be, the one just like in John chapter 4, the woman at the well, the one that Jesus should have had absolutely nothing to do with, who had been a leper, who hadn't gone and offered the sacrifices and been cleansed, so still ceremonially unclean. He turns back and he is praising God with a loud voice. There's absolutely nothing quiet about this. You will recognize the Greek word. The Greek word is the one that we get megaphone from. You can hear this guy. There is no quietness about him. His entire universe has changed physically. And he literally threw himself at the feet of Jesus, giving him thanks. Now, how anybody in the group knew he was a Samaritan, have no clue. We're not told. But here's the 12 with Jesus and the crowd that they're traveling with, and knowing that he's still dressed as a leper and all of this. And here he is throwing himself at Jesus' feet, and everybody is aghast. At the church where we pastored in Dallas, we had some rather interesting individuals show up for church on Sunday mornings. It was not unusual for those who were slightly inebriated. Sorry, ladies, but they usually sat right about where you three are sitting. I had one that as I preached, he decided to start snoring. So I preached louder. He snored louder. I preached louder. He snored louder. Everybody in the room was stone deaf except for my wife and my mother-in-law anyway, so I don't know that they would have heard it. I think my deacon was over there adjusting his hearing aid down. It was not unusual. But sadly, when he walked into the room, the Red Sea parted, and everybody, all the good Baptists who sat on that side of the room, moved to the other side. Yes, he stank. I'll just be totally honest. I mean, it was beyond anything that you could conceive of. Did it matter? No. He threw himself at Jesus' feet, giving thanks. Now, he was a Samaritan. Again, J.C. Ryle writes for us, scripturally, thankless Christians are a contradiction in terms. It's absolutely impossible to be thankless and be a Christian. It's an oxymoron. That's like saying you're a human that doesn't breathe. You have to breathe to live. Some form, shape, or fashion. Some way, whether it's on your own, mechanical, whatever. You have to take in oxygen. You cannot be thankless and be a Christian. We see more than we could ever conceive of in the entire history of the known universe, and yet we just go through life, okay. Allow me a brief politics here. I don't care who you like. I don't care who you vote for. Just vote. That's my only concern. But be thankful you live in a country where you can vote. I remember being in a country where people stood in line being threatened to be shot at and being very happy that they had purple stains on their thumb because for the first time in 40 years they could vote. 90% voter turnout. Anybody want to take guesses on what the percentage will be here? We take it for granted. We take it for granted that we'll get pulled over for speeding. And anybody's favorite thing in the world to do? Well, I mean, you probably loved every second of it, right? You know, you love it. You get to talk to all the cops. I mean, you know, I could just see Mr. Childs here. Do you know how fast you were going? Did anybody ever answer yes? I didn't think so. It's amazing how that memory just disappears. I don't know how fast I was going. 3 miles an hour. Believe it or not, that's not a bad thing. That keeps us from doing things we're not supposed to do. We take so much for granted. If only the saints could see their souls as the 10 afflicted lepers saw their bodies, they would pray far, far better than they do. We look around and the world seems to be spinning and going wonderful and everything's great and fine and good. And yet here were 10 whose only hope was that Jesus would do something. And the only hope that we have is that Jesus will do something. Then Jesus answered him and said, "We're not 10 cleansed. We're not. Where are the 9? Was no one found to return and pray and give praise to God except this foreigner?" I'll read verse 19 to you in just a minute. But here's a humbling and heart-searching lesson. The best of us are far too like the 9 lepers. We are more ready to pray than praise, and more disposed to ask God for what we do not have than to thank Him for what we do have. The widespread thanklessness of Christians is a scandal. It reveals our lack of humility, so we must pray for a deeper sense of our own sinfulness and admit how unworthy we really are. This, after all, is the true secret for a grateful heart. It is a person who daily feels his debt to grace and daily remembers that in reality he deserves nothing but hell, who will be a blessing and praising to God every day. Thankfulness only blossoms from a root of deep humility. Verse 19, and Jesus said to him, "Rise and go your way. Your faith has made you well." I will venture to say the other 9 physically were healed, but were as lost as goats on their way to Jerusalem. The one was saved. As important as it was to be cleansed of leprosy, that was insignificant beyond description to be cleansed of sin. The other 9 were more concerned about the physical outward appearance. The one knew that there was something totally different about him, and it wasn't the fact that he no longer had sores and scabs and pain and no more garments rent, no more living out in the middle of nowhere crying unclean, no more being away from family and friends, that there was something that had happened to him that only could happen to him in this instance. The one was saved, the other 9 were as lost as they were before. And as we've said on Wednesday night, the only appropriate response to a miracle of Christ is worship. We're going to look at several others over the next few weeks. And the question will be repeated. Where are you in the story? Oh, we would love to claim repeatedly, "Oh, well, I'm the one who returned." Okay. I think far too often we will go back and forth between the 1 and the 9. We get what we want or what we need, what we think we need. And we forget the one who gave it. We don't get what we think we need or far too often what we want, and we question. Why? Let me just put it to you this way about why. And there may be some who will disagree with this, and that's fine. We don't get to ask why. Everybody's jaws bounced off the ground. Here's why. You don't get to ask that question. He's God. He gets to make that determination. Job asked the question, why? He spent the last 4 chapters of Job getting the response. And here's the response. You want to know why? Okay, let's start with the easiest of all questions. How many snowflakes are in the north? Were you the one that told the ocean it could come this far and no farther? If we can't even handle the basics, how can you handle the difficult? Why did this happen? Because I'm God and that's what I do. Because in ways that you can't conceive of, in ways that you can't imagine, in ways that may not reveal themselves for decades or centuries later, I will be glorified through this, and that's the end goal of all of it. The Westminster Shorter Catechism gets it right. What is the chief end of man? The chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. Period. That is why we exist. That is why we were created. You want to know your purpose? To glorify God and enjoy everything that He has ever conceived of and made. And that will be different for every person in this room. For some, tomorrow it'll be out at the farm. For others, it'll be out working with hay and sheep tomorrow. For some, it will be thinking, gosh, I got to go to school at 8 o'clock in the morning and we get out at 3:30, and can we change the clocks? And for teachers, it will be like, can we please change the clocks and make it 5 o'clock so we can get home? For others, it may be, yes, the last client called and canceled and I can go home early. We must be grateful for what's happened. So let me ask you this morning, unbeliever. There were 10 that morning, that day, who were unbelievers. All needed the same thing, physically and spiritually. They physically got what they wanted and needed. But 9 of them walked away from the most important thing that they needed. Are you walking away from the thing that you need? Believer, there is no such thing as a thankless Christian. It's impossible. Can't exist. Can't. It cannot happen. You could just as soon find a human being that doesn't breathe as you could find a Christian who's thankless. And I promise you, you don't have to look very hard to find something to be thankful for. It's really rather easy. Father, we thank you that all of these years ago, 10 men stood at a great distance and cried as loud as they could and did everything within their human power to get your attention. And Lord Jesus, without even breaking stride, without even just anything, you saw them, you knew the need already, but you looked at them and you commanded them to go and show themselves to the priest, and they were healed. All 10. 9 of them were so thrilled and so excited they just kept on down the road. But one realized that there was something more that had happened. Something more important than just physical healing. And so he returned. And of the 10, he alone received the gift. Lord, may we be thankful Christians. Father, if there are those in this room who are not believers, may they know the gift. The one that is eternal, the one that saves, the one who encouraged those with leprosy to come to him and loved them enough to touch them and cleanse them. That not even the dirtiest, filthiest sinner is so dirty that you would not touch and love and heal. Father, we thank you that you are a God who shows us all so that we may be thankful for what you have done. And we ask these things in the name of the one who died to save our souls. Amen.